Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Ability Podcast with Damo and Eddy. Thanks for listening.
John, welcome, man. Thanks
you.
for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Good to have you here on the Ability Podcast.
Eddie, John, how are you both?
Good, mate.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Both had good weeks.
Yeah.
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 Yours been good?
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah.
Can't complain.
Yeah.
You know, no one listens.
No one listens.
And if they do, you have to pay them these days.
It's about right too, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So, tell us, I don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do, and where you've come from.
Wow, what a story. Where do I start?
Oh, tell us everything.
Okay, everything.
Or nothing. It's
Or
up to
nothing,
you.
yeah. I've been a therapist now for about 27 years.
Yep.
Worked in all different forms of therapeutic practice, from not-for-profit organisations to profitable organisations, from child safety to corrections to drug and alcohol areas. I've worked in hospitals. A lot of different places. Yeah.
So when it comes to mental health, you name it, you've done it.
Just about. Just about, yeah.
So I assume it's been a journey for you then.
Yeah, it totally has. And you learn so much every single day, you know what I mean? It's just, you're learning every single day from your clients. You're looking at some of their presenting issues, what's happening for them, how they're feeling, what's going on for them, and you learn.
Yep.
You know, you're constantly learning. Every single one of our clients is obviously totally unique individual, and they all have their own issues in life and how they're coping and that type of thing, and sometimes it's a challenge to work with them, but it's still a pleasure when you can give somebody some skills, some education to empower them to move forward, you know, in whatever they see as their perceived issues. So
Do you find in this industry sometimes you actually learn just as much from the peers that you work with as well as your participants as well?
100%. You look at every you talk about your colleagues and things like that you're working with. Every colleague you're working with, they've also got a lot of life experience.
Absolutely.
You know, they've got a lot of professional skill, professional experience. But to me, when you're starting to work with a lot of your colleagues who have good life experience in relation to stuff that's really happening, rather than just stuff that they've learnt at university, it really is totally amazing, you know, how their perception and their treatment for clients is totally different.
And I think that's what makes a big difference in this industry. You know, obviously, you know, I've never studied anything, but I have the lived experience, and I find the people that generally have a really good story to tell regarding their lived experience probably offer more to the participants on a personal level than just an educated level.
Yeah, I totally agree, Damon, because again, it's having true and genuine empathy with somebody.
Absolutely.
To understand what they're talking about.
You're not just saying it because you're being taught it by a lecturer.
Yeah.
Not against, you know, nothing against people that spent 7 years doing it. Good on them. I don't have the balls to do that because it's a long course to do. But I just feel the ones that have the lived experience can just offer that little bit more, like you said, empathy and
Comes with time, doesn't it?
life skills.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm a veteran, so I served in the military for 9 years.
Yep.
And having that lived experience of being a veteran, when I'm working with veterans in the therapeutic space,
You can absolutely
I
relate.
just simply go, you know, I was with 6 RAR, the 6th Royal Australian Regiment. That's all you need to say, because then the veteran understands you know what you're talking about. And then you're going into the therapeutic work, because straight away you've connected, you've bonded. They understand that you understand what it's like to live that life.
You could literally show them your DVA card and they've already connected with
Show
you.
them
Yeah,
the DVA card.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're connected.
you guys are already best mates.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
You
Got it.
served for 9 years in the military.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Which part of the military?
Infantry?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Infantry?
Infantry?
Yeah.
Yes.
The hard workers, the foot soldiers.
The foot soldiers,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for 9 years. Hey?
Yeah.
Any
Good 9
tours?
years.
Any tours?
No,
No tours?
no tours. I was actually lucky, for want of a better phrase. When I was in, there was no active service overseas.
Yep.
So I was very lucky.
So you're probably fortunate that.
Very, very fortunate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no Agent Orange from Vietnam.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Full on stuff.
So you're
Yeah.
probably too young for Vietnam and too old, or out of it by the time
By the time-
Iraq and Afghanistan and all that happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you were right in the middle.
Right in the middle there.
Good time to be in the infantry.
It was.
At what point did you decide you wanted to be a therapist? Was it?
I
at
guess it
point
was-
in the army already.
Yeah, well, it was because of my military experience. When I got injured in my military experience, and consequently I couldn't continue to be an infantry soldier.
Yeah.
And the military, in their great rehabilitation, said to me, "What do you want to do?" They had to obviously help you rehabilitate into civilian life. And I said, "I love talking to people." So consequently, the Defence Force paid for me to go to university,
Nice.
and that's how I did my psych degree.
When you say that, did that make you a little bit of an oddball within your infantry team, saying stuff like that, or was it just like?
Not at
Because I
all.
look at you and you're like, you're a blokey bloke. You've
Yeah.
served in the military, and then at the same time, you can hold that space as part of
Yeah.
who you are, but then also hold the space of like, I'm also a guy who's happy to talk about his feelings
Yeah.
and be a counsellor.
Yeah.
So was there a bit of like were people surprised to hear you doing that, or was it just like, oh yeah, awesome,
Not
that sounds
really.
like John?
Even my friends now that know me, I think they've known me. I think my personality and who I am is I love talking to people and sharing my story and their story with them and having a true conversation. So even before my quarrels, that was me as my character. I remember sitting in areas where we were training, and we were muddy and dirty and hungry and etc. But I could still sit and have a yarn with my colleagues, my fellow soldiers, and and that's what it's about.
That's cool.
It's about really understanding somebody and listening to their story, and I think that's a specialty that most therapists have to have in place. They need to be able to communicate, and to me, communication is about shutting up and actually listening. Actually listening to somebody's story, and not dictating to them and telling them what their story is. Not diagnosing somebody. That's not what they want.
No.
People want to be heard.
Most of the people that need diagnosing already know what their diagnosis is.
Yeah.
They just want someone to shut up and listen.
That's right. So right, no, that's exactly right.
So
yeah.
after your military career and your psychology course, what did you do after that?
Immediately, I actually went into my first role. I started working for a company. I started working for a company in Queensland called Good Start to Life,
Yep.
and it was a company that worked with autistic children. And again, it was such a beautiful experience to actually work with autism.
Yep.
I'd never.
What year was this?
Yes, oh God. Looking at my age. Back in
So
A while back.
a long while
Back
back.
So-
when people used to have landlines.
Yeah, and black and white TVs.
Okay.
So
the
way
autism
before-
program back then.
way before NDIS was conceived then.
Oh
Yep,
yeah.
okay.
This is when disability support,
Yeah.
pensions were all about, and that's all.
Yep.
The funding was, but
Yeah.
it was great working with. I'd never worked with autistic kids, and to learn from, like you were talking before, Damon, to learn from other colleagues who'd worked in that space for a long time and learn and understand. I'd learned everything in university, but I'd never worked in that space. But it was such a beautiful experience, to look at the boundaries that these kids needed, and to help them sort of achieve some of their things. It was just magical.
Did you find that taught you more than what you ever learnt in uni?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I think every time you go out to see a client, and even though you may understand the basic construct
and the wording that's being used.
the wording that's being used in relation to depression, anxiety, stress, whatever the case might be. But actually sitting in their space, you learn so much. You know, and like we spoke about before, everybody's so individually unique, and their story is individually unique.
Learning about people and who they are is so much more in depth than what university can teach you by reading a book.
Yeah, I totally agree. 100% totally agree.
So you've been a therapist 27 years, right? I would think, when I hear that immediately, I think to myself, like, what advice would you offer to somebody to be in a career that long? Because I think burnout and sustaining a career like that and having the resilience for that long, I think that would be like a lot of the peers that you went to uni with. Are they still doing the same work, or are they a bit jaded, or are they?
A lot of them are jaded, a lot of them walk out, but you're so right. I think, and a part of what we teach our clients is about self-care. It's about nutrition. It's about all those basic things which, unless you're looking after them.
You're trying to preach what you're trying to do. Does that resonate with you in your life?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like I'm taking a week off work. I'm taking a week off work at the end of this month, simply because I'm going to take a break after 4 months of work. I'm just going to take a week where me and the wife are just going to do nothing. You know, it's just that's what you need to do: self-care, look after yourself, so you don't burn out.
And the older you get, the more you feel like you need it too.
Yeah.
Well, you're more aware of it.
Well, we're not all young whippersnappers like you.
No, I've been close to the burnout line before, working in drug and alcohol work. I think because it can sometimes feel like there's always a present need. Like there's always some situation that isn't right for somebody that you work with, you know, is suffering or not at peace or at risk. That, you know, I remember getting a call from a client one time, just finished my shift, and he said, "Mate, I've just drank a whole bunch. I want to kill myself."
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I worked through the process with my manager, what we're going to do and how we're going to, get an ambulance to him.
Yeah.
But the immediate emotional response while you get into the work can be just like, oh, do I just go and make sure he gets to hospital safely? And it's like, you have to learn that there's only so much you can do, and you're not these people's messiah or their hero. And whether you're there or not, the same problems they're facing are still going to be there. So,
and I think
I'm not saying that like it's easy either. Like it's not, and particularly with what we're seeing with some of the NDA stuff with budget restraints and people working with them not having the hours, but they're still providing a service, particularly support coordination. There is a tendency to be like, I need to rescue these people or help these people.
Beyond Plan Managers help make your NDIS journey simple. With Beyond Plan Managers, you can experience personal, quick support from a dedicated team. No big call centers, no hassles. Beyond Plan Managers will handle the admin so you can focus on what's important. If you're looking for a seamless NDIS experience, click the link in the description and choose Beyond Plan Managers.
Help these people.
Absolutely, and I was just going to say, in this industry alone, it is really, really hard to go home and not be thinking about one of your clients.
Oh, for sure.
Like, are they going to be there Monday?
Yeah. And I think what you were saying was right. I mean, if you go into the stage where you start to try to rescue people, that's where the mistake is, because
You can't.
that's not our role. It's not our role to actually try and rescue people.
And without accountability as a therapist, I think people can jump into that, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, our role is to try and empower people, to give them the skills so that they can move forward.
Yeah.
And so that they can move forward into their future as they see it.
Yeah. And what they choose that future to be.
Exactly.
Not what we think, you've got to do this. Well, maybe they do, but if they choose not to do that.
That's right. It's their goal. It's their future.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
So let them, actually, I like to, I think we spoke before, I like to look at someone's abilities that they have and how they want to move forward. What are their goals in life that they've got? Not what somebody else dictates or identifies. It's their goals.
The classic one that you see with like families or people's like, such and such needs to stop smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe they don't want it, or maybe
they're not ready.
they aren't ready, or maybe all they want to do is reduce, or maybe that's not even an issue for them.
Yeah.
but
I think
somebody else dictates to them that this is what you need to do.
And I think we've had this chat before already where, the statistic came out that the smoking rate is higher in the disability community than in the able-bodied community. And, we can have 7 therapists a week tell us to stop smoking. But at the end of the day, when you live on your own, you go home to your dog or your cat, you've got no family, and all you've got is a pack of cigarettes, you're not going to listen to the 7 people that tell you to stop smoking when you literally have nothing else.
And that's right. And when we look at smoke and we look at alcohol, we look at drugs of any description, I think the general public know the consequences that will have on
Of course they do.
physically, mentally, etc.
But if it makes you feel better at that point in time, you're not
It's a
going to change
Band-Aid.
it.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a band-aid that's covering up the real reason, the causation of my use.
And until it stops holding you together, you won't make a change.
Yep. Until I'm ready to make that change.
Or your body forces you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
On a side step, my man, what would be some advice you would offer participants or support coordinators in this, I guess, time of uncertainty while funding's changing, or even if people are trying to find a coordinator, what they should be looking for or expecting from those services?
I think the thing I like about NDIS is it gives a person choice and control.
Yeah.
That to me is what the most important thing that I've taken from the NDIS process, and I sell that concept to my clients. At the end of the day, I've got big shoulders. Good therapists, good support coordinators should have big shoulders.
Yeah.
And be able to listen to the client. And sometimes you just don't connect to a client. The client doesn't connect with you. So recognise that. And if the client doesn't feel connected with that worker, say, look, man, I'm just not feeling it,
Yeah.
I want to go somewhere else. And then encourage them to help them to go somewhere else to get the support.
Yeah, not worry about, oh, geez, there goes my pay packet.
Yeah, exactly.
Because at the end of the day, we're only trying to help them.
That's right. Client focused.
Yes.
Be client focused. And if if someone is genuine and being focusing on the client's needs,
The way it will come for them.
you couldn't care less whether they work with you or somebody else.
Totally.
Who cares? They're getting the help they need from wherever they need it.
My main problem with, I guess, the NDIS is a lot of people don't even understand what choice and control means.
Like participants.
Participants,
Yeah.
yes, and they inadvertently get stuck by 1 or 2 companies that hoard all their services.
Yeah.
And then if that person is, they've got 7 services through 2 providers,
Yep.
Yeah.
then now all of a sudden I'm unhappy with my support coordinator,
Yeah.
but with that support coordinator I've got 5 other services with that company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah.
If I leave that support coordinator, are they gonna
get the service?
are they gonna dump all my other services? Are they gonna be mad at me? Are they gonna be,
They set
no,
a
you
minimum.
can't do that?
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
And that whole, then they feel like they're not holding the power, and like, oh, I've got to wait another 6 weeks to get my wheelchair anyway from them, so I can't cancel with them, and that monopoly of power starts to happen, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you automatically go back to the 90s where you've got maybe 2 government-run companies,
Yeah.
and that's the only choice you've got.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
in this
The
day and
client
age,
can have
that
a
is
real-
not the case.
That's right. The client can have a real feeling of a power imbalance. They can think that the organisation is controlling what they can do.
Yep. And in my life, I've got 2 OTs from 2 different companies, but they both control 2 different aspects of my life.
Yeah.
One is for my wheelchair, and one is all for my in-home stuff. And then I've got 4 or 5 different support workers. 2 of them are ABN private workers, and then I've got 3 from a company, and that's what choice and control is.
Well, within a couple of minutes of meeting you, it's pretty obvious that you are able to communicate, dictate, and be assertive about what you want and need.
Yes,
Like
and
a lot of people that are confused, I think, their default is, I trust you, mate, I'm so thankful you're here,
Yeah.
do what you can, instead of, I think maybe the responsibility back on the provider to say, great that you trust me,
Yeah.
but this is the cost for our service.
And
Yeah.
Just so you know.
you need
Yeah.
to be able to
Yeah.
help me make the right choices for you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, next minute you get a contract with 7 services with 2 providers.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So it's good your roles around, mate.
Yeah.
So you do support coordination now at Be Cognitive? Is that
No,
where?
I'm a mental health counsellor.
Great. So that's your full role in
That's
the NDIS.
my full
Awesome.
role here.
Yeah.
Who'd you say you works for?
Be Cognitive, one of our sponsors.
I see we've
They're awesome.
actually
That's where we are today.
we came to work wearing the same shirt today.
Yeah.
You guys
right.
look
Funny,
cute.
eh?
You guys are matching.
Well, I should shave my head and get a pair of glasses. We'll be twinnies.
Love it. Love it. Cool. What else do you want to talk about?
You mentioned earlier before we started recording
I've got
that
a couple
you did a
questions as well.
brief time in corrections.
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I've worked in the corrections side of things in so many different forms. At one stage, I worked in corrections, or it was called CORE, then in Victoria, and I was a community work coordinator, and that was an interesting career as well. In that I would go out and try and find services where people who are on correctional orders could actually do their time within the community.
So almost like community service, but while being locked up.
Correct.
Yep.
They were doing community services within the community.
Okay.
You know, and the courts might have given them 20 hours per week that they had to do community service. So you had to find a suitable location that was going to suit their offending behaviour,
Yep.
And it was sometimes quite difficult, you know, especially when you had folk who had like sex offending reports, so you had to make sure that.
So of course you couldn't get them cleaning a park near a
with
school or
children and
childcare.
et cetera.
Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha. And would that take the hours they did community service? Would that then take time off their sentence?
Or that was a part of their sentence.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, it was a part of it. That was a part of they'd been to court, and that was the court's finding. They had to do bail conditions. Yeah, they had to do an ICO and intentional correctional services, and they might have had to attend drug and alcohol counselling sessions. Might have had to report in weekly or monthly or whatever, as well as doing community services.
Did you ever have any guys or girls that when you had them out in the community doing projects that they actually turned around and go, wow, I actually enjoy doing this? And then did they follow that up after they got out?
Yeah, quite often they did. A lot of them did this. Again, suddenly there was a skill, and that was part of my role to actually establish the sort of skill that person had. Not necessarily the qualification, but the skill. I'm a great communicator.
And a lot of them wouldn't even have any skills whatsoever
No,
because all they've done is been in and out of jail their whole life.
but it's really interesting, Darren, when you look at that. Everybody has some skill, and when you sort of really invest time in looking at the person's skill
They
base
just
they've
didn't
got,
know it yet.
yeah,
Yep.
they might be a great communicator. They're just good at talking. That's a brilliant skill. So you can actually set them up maybe in a volunteer situation where they're walking around, you know, showing people engines and motors and things like that. But they're talking to the community. They're talking to people because they've just got great skill in doing it.
I think, and like one of the things about the NDIS that I think is great is some of these offenders or people that have had an offence, they are just like wrong person, wrong situation, a series of events, and prison probably was never even the right fit anyway. Like, you know, we know that some of the statistics of people in corrections now, in facilities, with schizophrenia and acquired brain injuries, there's cofactors going on to why they're even incarcerated. So yeah, hopefully we see a reduction and more people, you know.
And I think that's probably one of the most important things for me. Somebody who has been convicted of an offence, and sometimes the therapeutic world, we keep looking at that person's behaviour. And if we keep focusing on that person's behaviour, what they've been convicted of or haven't, but keep focusing on behaviour, that's where therapy stops. You need to actually look at the causation of that behaviour. What are the beliefs and the emotions that led to that behaviour? And if you can start to challenge and teach people how to challenge that belief pattern and actually have new beliefs, it's going to actually impact on their different emotions and hence different behaviours.
And you don't need to be a counsellor to, like, obviously you need a counsellor, but you don't necessarily need a counsellor to do that. Like, that's a big thing when we look at people hurting themselves and suicide. Mates and friends being informed enough to have really good conversations with people is an amazing art form.
Oh yeah.
And it's so important that we as a community do that, because the amount of people that have these conversations, I'm sure, with you over the years, and it's like, mate, these are skills that we all need.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie and I have had a discussion before on another episode where we were talking about disability and dating and disability and sex and teaching people with intellectual disabilities the do's and the don'ts and the rights and the wrongs of even just being online, looking up websites. If they don't know, they don't know. Because, and then we got into the discussion about how, little Timmy might be searching things up on the internet that he probably shouldn't be, but he doesn't know that. But then next minute he's got the police knocking on his door because he's inappropriately said something or done something that he genuinely doesn't understand that it was wrong. And then you've got those people as well that are getting locked up that genuinely don't even know they did wrong.
And the other part, and the other extension of that, Damien, is when we're starting to look at different cultures within our country. Within Australia, we have so many different cultures within this country, and yet we assume that everybody that comes to this country understands what the regulations and the laws are in relation to this country.
Like with age and minors and all that sort of stuff.
Well,
in other countries, it's
talk about domestic violence.
Yes.
Talk about domestic violence, a really strong one. In some countries, it's appropriate and ethical and right and correct for a male to physically and verbally abuse their partners.
And
and yet, when they come here, obviously, it is against the law here, and we've got to re-educate them in that form so that they understand this is the laws of this country and the impact on that partner if you physically or verbally abuse a partner will be this. And once you give a man that understanding, they go, wow, I never thought about that. For generations, my culture has done that.
Absolutely.
So it's, again, education. But stop treating people for our judgment and actually give them that education. And then once you've given them that education and they still commit that crime, then you can actually say,
give them their just...
You've been educated, man. You know that's not right.
BHA is redefining disability supports with a focus on human rights. BHA is committed to providing education and accreditation by using our lived experience to enhance the lives of people with disabilities through a human rights-based approach. Our team of dedicated practitioners aims to transform the sector by elevating human rights as a benchmark. So join BHA in creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Click the link to learn more about our mission and how you can be a part of it. Absolutely. And what you were saying about, different ethnicities and stuff, it was only a few months ago that I learned what the meaning rule of thumb actually means. Do you know what it means?
Go on.
It's about that, back in the early 1900s, and even now in some other countries, it's legal for a man to beat his wife with a stick that is no rounder than the size of your thumb. And ever since I learned that, I have not used that phrase ever again.
It's crazy.
And I'm just like, everybody uses that phrase so often, but if they knew what it meant,
they wouldn't use it.
No. I was horrified to find out the true meaning behind it.
Yeah, I mean, we look at so many different phrases that people use, and yet it's not until they know the meaning. Bastard, what does bastard mean?
Yeah.
And when we start to look at the real reason of it, you wouldn't use that terminology. But sometimes we just use terminology and it slips off our tongue.
I mean, I jokingly always say, you bastard.
Yeah.
And I was like, hang on, I know you've got a dad. He's not a random guy.
Yeah.
But it's just what we use.
Yeah. That's right. So, again, I think it's understanding and listening and really hearing people's stories, listening to our own stories, and thinking before we speak. You know, it's really important.
Sounds like you've just pretty much covered the entire world of what you can and can't do in mental health industry.
Yeah.
You would have been in some predicaments or situations where you've looked back on it and gone, wow, I actually got out of that alive.
Yeah, many times. I mean, I'm obviously presently and have done for many years going into people's homes, and you know, so the risk factor of going to somebody's home, you don't know the circumstances behind their day, even though you might know the client, and you might have gone to the home a million times before. You don't know what's happened to them just prior to them getting there. So there's risk factors there. I've been in incidents where I've been sitting in an office, and I've had clients come in, sit opposite me at a desk situation, and within the therapeutic process, I have said something which may have triggered them, which I've been unaware of. And this particular case, I remember a man, you know, pulling a ladder at 45 and pointing it at my head.
Yeah.
You know, and you're sitting there frozen, and then you're basically talking him down. You know,
While fearing for your life.
Yep.
Yep.
And you're pressing an alarm button underneath the desk, and by the time that gun has moved away from my forehead, I was working at the courts at the time. The police have come in, bang, grabbed the man and removed him. But again, when you look at that circumstance where this man was at, I knew this client really well. There was no indicators that he was going that way.
He just had a bad day.
Just had a bad day.
Yep.
You know, the fact that he had a weapon on him, he might have had a weapon on him every single day of his life, for all I know.
Yep, and you know, I'm not going to mention names here or anything, but we've recently had that incident happen here as well. You know, where one of our workers has gone to a house to a client that they had worked at many times.
Yeah.
And ended up being assaulted.
Yep. And in this industry, unfortunately, you know, workers place themselves at risk all the time.
Yes.
And I think we have to be conscious about, you know, someone's emotions and feelings. We don't know what's going on for somebody.
That's right. And
You know, we have no idea.
it's easy for companies to go, oh, okay, well, that's it. You're no longer travelling on your own to clients' houses. But when you've been going to a client's house for so long and you think you know them inside out and back to front, you don't think about having to take an escort with you.
No, that's right. It's all the stuff you've got to take into consideration.
Yep.
Yeah.
And do you have any plans for the next 5 years?
Next 5 years.
Besides holidaying around Australia with your wife, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully doing
Yep.
some stuff like that.
I'm
too.
only assuming that's a part of your plan.
Yeah, we actually are hoping to do that. You know, we're actually talking the other day about possibly buying a houseboat and literally going up the Murray River and just stopping and starting and fishing. And,
So New Year's party on the houseboat with you then?
pardon?
New Year's party with you on the
New Year's
houseboat
party
then?
on the house.
Eddie and I will be there, eh?
Nice, mate. Nice, very cool. Love that. Love
Yeah,
that.
real fun.
Do you have any questions for John?
I don't know, man. We can edit this part as well, but do we want to talk a little bit about the current topic of DV?
Yeah,
From a
absolutely.
counselling
It's obviously a hot topic, and
Yeah.
the AFL were all over it last weekend, and
I've been super quiet about it on social platforms and
it's something that's
personally,
really hard to
it's
talk about.
really hard to talk about because it's like, you know, I don't have the experience of it, but also it's so gut-wrenchingly sad that people are dying. And I just ask so many questions about what's going on for men generationally, that predominantly our men are doing this to women and not, and you know, I haven't fully looked into the stats and data about it, but it's like some of this isn't accidental, it seems. This is men that are repeatedly engaging in this behaviour without any boundary. other than the
thoughts?
law stepping in some point to sort of, I don't know if it's a slap on the wrist. I'm not following all the data and information, but it seems like not, it's just such a big topic. Like, you're obviously at the interface counselling with people and experiencing that.
I've done a lot of domestic violence stuff, and when you start to work with men who are offenders of domestic violence, they're perpetrators of domestic violence, I think it's something that you can't soften the wording. It's not a hamsy-pamsy thing. It's a criminal offence.
You basically have to say to them that they beat their wife.
They beat their wife.
Yep.
They've done this. And when I speak with men, you start to speak to men about they are responsible for their behaviours. We are all responsible for our behaviours, whatever we choose to do. If I choose to hit my wife, I've chosen to do that. That's my behaviour, and I'm responsible for the consequences. And it's okay to be responsible for the consequences, but it's amazing when you start to show men what is the impact of your behaviour on that woman. What is she suffering? What is she feeling? And if you can get a man to actually change his whole belief pattern, change his thought pattern about his behaviour and the impact on her, it's amazing how a man can actually change.
Unlock a seamless NDIS experience with Plan Partners. Say goodbye to paperwork hassles and hello to quick reimbursements and exclusive benefits. Our app and online dashboard make managing your NDIS funds easy, ensuring you maximise every dollar for the supports you need. Choose Plan Partners for expert advice, simplified fund management, and a focus on your goals. Click the link in the description to get started.
I think the biggest thing for me, and I was going to say this after Eddie asked you the question, but for me, women marry men because they trust them, right?
Yeah.
They trust them to protect them. They trust them to keep them safe. They trust them in every aspect of their life. And to have that trust betrayed on a regular basis, or even as a one, you hit your wife once in 40 years, that's just as bad as hitting her repeatedly.
Yep.
Right? Like, marriage and love is ultimately built on trust. And the minute that is gone, like, I can't imagine how the woman would feel.
Ask a man who's been domestically violent against his partner, and ask the man to visualise that he's sitting back watching another man
Beat his wife.
beat his daughter.
Okay, yep.
Have you asked that in
Oh, yeah.
counselling before?
What's the
yeah.
response you get?
And the response is, my God, if something bloody happened,
I'd get up and kick
I'd
the shit
get up
out of
and
him.
kill the shit out of him,
Yep.
blah, 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 etc.
It's a good way to frame it.
So now you've just done the same thing to your wife.
So how do you think your wife's father
And
feels?
puts reality into their minds and gets them to start thinking, oh yeah, I wouldn't want it to happen to my daughter. I'll kill the bloke that did it, but then I'm doing exactly the same thing. And then you also look at men that abuse their wife verbally, physically, sexually, or whatever the case might
And
be.
the coercive stuff is really
Yep.
And ask them
fascinatingly
about
messed up.
doing that sort of stuff in front of their sons,
Yep.
and then wondering where their sons are imitating their behaviours. Those learnt behaviours.
The
Those
sons.
learnt behaviours, they're not right,
Yep.
but they learn them.
Yep. It's like that. Do you remember that beer ad that used to be on TV where, it started in the 60s and the dad would go, oi, son, get me a beer.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the 70s, oi, grandkid, get me a beer.
Yeah.
And then in the next one, it's the grandkid is grown up
Yep.
and he's like, oi, kid, get me a beer.
Yeah.
And it really is the same with all types of abuse as well.
Of course it is. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, it's just a repetitive cycle, and somehow that cycle needs to be broken. And somewhere in that family line, someone needs to say no and stop. But it's interesting when you start to work with men, get them to have that realisation that their behaviour they're responsible for and the impact that it's having on others around them, and get them to focus on that impact. They then can change their own behaviour. But again, men have got to want to and be willing to change their behaviour.
So for me, I have a really interesting female perspective with my wife, given that I grew up in a home with me and 3 brothers and a male dominant household. So very masculine, guys run around, lots of testosterone flying around, lots of teenagers.
Yeah.
Things that I never even have had to think about or consider as a guy that my wife shares with me. Like as a teenager, I would wander the streets at night.
Yep.
As a young man with my pet dog or going and kicking the soccer ball when it's dark. And for my partner, her as a young woman, like, you know, there's things as a woman that they're fearful of that as a guy I'd never even had to have thought about or be frightened of.
Yeah.
But, you know, concerns of being abused and things like that as a young woman is things that women actually think about. And something as a young guy, never once crossed my mind as a teenager wandering the streets. The worst I thought of was like, maybe I'll get in a fight and then run home. Like, that's the worst.
And believe it or not, like, I'm not in the position to defend myself whatsoever. But I was exactly the same when I was a teenager, early 20s, out walking the streets at 3 in the morning, going up to the Caltex to get something to eat. And I was never, ever, ever concerned about someone hurting me because of the position I'm in.
Yeah.
Tibby is reshaping disability supports by using the human rights model. We believe in delivering support with you, not just for you. Join Tibby, where everyone's unique humanity is valued and supported. Contact Tibby for all your disability support services and click the link to find out how we can make a difference together.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Well, number one, I'd be like, well, it'd have to take a pretty low person to do that.
Yeah.
But I know they're out there. They wouldn't think twice about it.
That's right. Yeah.
But for women, they have to think that every time they leave the house.
Yeah. And yet, why should a woman have to, why should a woman have to be concerned about what she's wearing? I mean, how many times have we heard men say, she was dressed sexy, so therefore she was asking for it? No, it's not that she's asking for it. It's still your responsibility. She's dressed beautifully because that's how she feels beautifully.
But you behave like a gentleman.
Yep, that's right. And you treat someone respectful. Doesn't matter how they dress or what they're doing or what they're saying or how they present. You still have to be responsible for your behaviours.
And like, I think even some of the comments men make and the things some men do and don't do, like us as men, there needs to be more, within our culture needs to be more conversation, accountability, and changing how we choose to. The classic one is that all the men sit in the kitchen, in the dining table, while the women clear the table. That's a classic male thing that we do. That come on,
world.
like we got to step up and start changing the culture. You know? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a bit of a outfield question here. Have you ever spoken to a man that has been on the receiving end of the domestic violence?
Yes, I have.
And how is their psyche the same as a woman's?
No, completely different, and it's really, really difficult because, again, just like we were talking before, the man feels that I'm a man, so I can take it, and so I can't talk about this. When I've done domestic violence counselling with men victims, typically we see the female sex, if they've been physically or verbally abused, etc., they will talk about that amongst themselves because girls will talk and have a chat with each other. Girls are great communicators. Men, we don't do it.
We just bottle
sit
it up
back and
and
hold it inside, and we don't talk about it. We don't go to the pub and say, "Oh, my wife yelled at me." We don't do it. Girls will do it. They'll talk about it. They're easy to talk about. It feels easy and comfortable for them. Men, when you say to men when they've been physically and verbally abused by their wives, they don't go to the police and report it. That's why the stats show that the male is the perpetrator and the female is the victim.
That's because the man is scared they're ultimately going to be laughed at by the police sergeant at the desk.
Yeah. So to empower men who are victims to say, okay, if your wife is hitting you, with an instrument or whatever, she's physically abusing you, you need to report that to the police. Just as if you were doing that to your female partner, I would tell her to report it to the police.
Yeah,
Do you think
they're willing to talk to you about it's like a couple of blokes? Counselling with just a couple of blokes chatting.
Yeah.
Do you think there's been a case, because obviously statistics show that men against women is so much higher than it is woman against man. But do you think sometimes a small percentage of that rate is a man finally retaliating against an abusive woman.
Very much so, Damien, and yeah, and definitely 100% can be.
Because obviously we hear stories, especially from the US, where
Yeah.
a woman's gone mad and shot her husband 10 times, right?
Yeah.
What led her to that, right? An abusive situation. So I guess my point is,
Yeah.
what led that man, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything here, like my eyes are wide open, but there are cases where a man that has never spoken up, never told anybody that he's actually the victim, has then suddenly reacted and killed his wife. Like, that happens, right?
Yeah, it does, and that's what's literally so sad, is that a man doesn't feel that they have the ability to actually open up and be honest and open and be vulnerable
Yeah.
about what's going on, because if they were, then they might not get to that stage of committing a crime like killing his wife, because we'll get to a stage of snapping, a point where the person can't go on any further, so they may snap.
But then, of course, because the man killed his wife, it's now another statistic against the men,
Against the men.
regardless of the
Yeah,
circumstances.
no matter what the circumstances
Yeah.
were that led up to it,
Yeah.
the causation, the cause and effect, Yeah. Yeah.
It's
There's
crazy.
so
isn't it?
much that needs to be unpacked.
I mean,
Yeah.
we
around
could
this.
probably talk about this for hours, couldn't we?
Well,
You definitely could be.
I
And
think
this,
we all want to see the change,
Yeah.
and we want to see the funding going to the right places, and not this being rushed just before an election or something.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
like a sales pitch, we want
Yeah.
this to be like socially addressed as a nation.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I feel if you're a man that is being the abuser, even you as the abuser need to reach out and get help. And if you're the victim of it, reach out and get help.
I mean, one of the things the government's doing at the moment, when we're looking at the media, that they're talking about, funding a lot of victim services for the female victim, which again is fantastic. But to me, we will constantly keep getting the female victim, unless we actually do something about the perpetrator. And so what I really believe needs to be financed and funded, for me personally, is we need to put funding into education with men. Yeah, education with men, to give them that education about what is domestic violence, what is domestic and family violence, what it is. Give the men the education, allow men to be voluntary to come to counselling services to gain that education. Because if they're educated, then hopefully we won't need as many victim services, because we're educating the men not to be that way.
Are you a parent?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah.
Eddie, you're not yet?
No.
No, I am. Like, the last thing I would ever want is for my daughter or for my two boys to ever think it's okay to be abused by someone they're supposed to trust.
Yeah.
Because it's not okay.
No.
And like you said earlier, if my daughter was being abused, I would find a way to kick the shit out of the guy.
Yeah.
Might not be me, but someone will.
Yeah.
Because it's just not okay.
We've been going for 45 minutes.
Yeah, man, I think we've done a bloody good job.
Yeah.
John, thanks so much for coming on, man.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate you. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing in this space, and for just acting out on your giftings and having conversations with people and being a part of the Be Cognitive team and supporting our NDIS community.
I feel like we probably could have gone a lot longer.
Right.
There's a lot to unpack, but maybe we'll have to do a part 2 somewhere down the road.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
After you've had that trip with the wife around Australia.
Appreciate you, man.
Awesome, thank you, John.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you very much.
And cut.